Welcome to Midnight Truth, where peaceful stories guide you into the perfect night's rest. Before we start, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It helps me bring more soothing stories to you and others who need them. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Now, find your cozy spot, close your eyes, and let's begin this calming journey together. I never thought I'd end up in a place like this. After the divorce finalized last month, I needed a fresh start, something affordable and quiet where I could rebuild my life. That's how I found myself standing in front of 437, Maplewood Avenue, keys in hand, staring at what would become my new home. The real estate agent had called it charming and full of character, but to me, it just looked old and tired. The white paint on the Victorian-style house was peeling, revealing gray wood beneath, and the wraparound porch sagged slightly in the middle. Still, it was within my budget, and the interior photos showed potential. As I pushed open a heavy front door, the scent of damp wood and something faintly sweet, maybe old perfume, greeted me. The hallway stretched before me, lined with dark wood paneling that made the space feel smaller than it actually was. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors as I walked through each room, testing the creaks and groans of the old building. The living room to my left featured a large bay window that let in surprisingly good light, though the glass itself was wavy and distorted the view of the overgrown front yard. To my right, the dining room held an ancient chandelier that swayed slightly, though there was no breeze. The kitchen at the back of the house still had its original porcelain sink and yellowing tile countertops, charming in a retro sort of way. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms waited, their sloped ceilings betraying the house's age. It took me 3 trips to get all my boxes inside, each journey up and down the stairs adding another layer of familiarity with the house's quirks. The 3rd step from the bottom always creaked, no matter how carefully I stepped. The window in the smallest bedroom stuck when you try to open it more than 6 inches. And there was definitely something wrong with the plumbing. Every time I turned on a faucet, the pipes groaned like they were in pain. By the time I finished unpacking the essentials, night had fallen. I stood in the kitchen, eating leftover Chinese food straight from the container, while listening to the house settle around me. It made sense that an old building like this would make noises, with expanding and contracting, foundations shifting. Still, when I finally climbed into bed in the master bedroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching me, waiting for something. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the lace curtains and decided to explore the neighborhood. That's when I met Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who lived in the blue house across the street. She was watering her azaleas when I approached, and her smile seemed genuine enough until I mentioned my new address. "Oh dear," she said, lowering her voice even though we were alone on the sidewalk. "That house has quite the history, you know. Terrible things happened there years ago." Her eyes darted toward my front door, then quickly away, as if she was afraid of being seen talking about it. Before I could ask more, she changed the subject to the local grocery store hours and community events. But her earlier words lingered in my mind as I watered my own struggling garden later that afternoon. What terrible things could have happened in my new home? The real estate agent hadn't mentioned anything unusual during our tour. Then again, people often romanticized old houses with ghost stories and urban legends. That night, as I lay in bed reading, I heard for the first time a soft thud from somewhere below, like someone had dropped a book. I froze, listening intently, but the house remained silent after that single sound. Probably just the foundation settling, I told myself, though I couldn't remember hearing any similar noises during my first night. Still, I made a mental note to check the basement tomorrow, assuming I could find where the door was hidden behind all those boxes. The first week passed in a blur of unpacking and establishing routines. Each morning, I woke to the sound of birds chirping outside my bedroom window, their cheerful songs contrasting sharply with the house's increasingly unsettling nighttime symphony. During the day, everything seemed normal, almost too normal. The creaks and groans of the old building felt expected, comforting even, like the house was learning to accommodate me just as I was learning its rhythms. But come nightfall, the atmosphere shifted. On Tuesday evening, while washing dishes after dinner, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, Whipping around, I found myself staring into the darkened dining room, the chandelier's crystals catching the kitchen light and throwing rainbows across the walls. Nothing moved. No one was there. Just my imagination playing tricks, I told myself, returning to scrubbing tomato sauce from a plate. Wednesday brought a new development. A distinct smell of earth and decay that seemed to emanate from the basement. I finally located the door behind a stack of moving boxes in the kitchen pantry. Its warp resisted my attempt to open it, the rusted hinges protesting loudly before giving way with a final, reluctant groan. The air that wafted up carried that same disturbing odor, mixed with something metallic that made my stomach churn. My work schedule helped maintain some semblance of normalcy. As a copy editor for the local newspaper, my days followed a predictable pattern. Coffee at 7, walk to the office by 8, and home again by 5:30. The routine provided comfort, a shield against the growing unease that crept into my thoughts during quiet moments. My colleagues were friendly enough, though most conversations stayed surface level. I wasn't ready to share my living situation yet, not when I myself couldn't explain what exactly felt wrong about the house. On Thursday, I encountered Mrs. Henderson again while retrieving my mail. This time, she didn't mention the house's history, instead asking about my job and whether I'd found everything I needed in town. Her casual tone seemed forced, her eyes lingering on my porch longer than necessary. When I returned inside, I noticed that one of the upstairs windows, the one in the smallest bedroom, was now open wider than I'd left it, despite still sticking at 6 inches. Friday night marked a turning point. I'd been reading in bed when the temperature suddenly dropped. The air grew so cold that my breath missed in front of me, though the thermostat downstairs read a comfortable 72 degrees. Pulling an extra blanket around my shoulders, I tried to convince myself it was just a draft, maybe from the stuck window. But when I reached to close it, I discovered that it was firmly shut, ice forming along the bottom edge of the glass. Sleep became increasingly difficult. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like approaching footsteps. The house's usual settling noises seemed louder, more deliberate. Yet each morning, rational explanations presented themselves. The wind had picked up. The pipes were older than I realized. Houses like this always made noise. These logical explanations should have comforted me, but instead, they only heightened my awareness of the house's peculiarities. Saturday morning, I found myself drawn to the local library, searching for information about 437 Maplewood Avenue. The reference librarian, a young woman named Sarah, hesitated when I asked about historical records. "There's not much," she said carefully, glancing around the empty room before continuing. "Most of the archives from the early 1900s are incomplete. Fires, you know." Her fingers tapped nervously on the counter. "But I did hear, well, never mind, probably just stories." "What kind of stories?" I pressed, trying to keep my voice casual. She shook her head, gathering books in a return cart with sudden determination. "Nothing important, just local legends. People tend to make up tales about old houses." Her evasive answer only fueled my curiosity, but she refused to elaborate further, busying herself with shelving books until I left. That night, unable to sleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, listening to the house breathe around me. The clock above the stove ticked louder than usual, each second stretching into eternity. From somewhere deep within the walls came a soft, scratching sound, like tiny claws against wood. Mice, probably, or tree branches brushing against the siding. Rational explanations abounded, yet none satisfied the growing knot of anxiety in my stomach. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear, temporarily banishing my unease. I spent the day organizing my office space and front room, arranging books and papers until the room felt properly mine. The sunlight streaming through the bay window created warm pools on the hardwood floor, chasing away the shadows that had gathered in corners during previous nights. For a few hours, I almost convinced myself that my fears were nothing more than a natural adjustment period that came with moving into an unfamiliar place. Yet as dusk fell, the familiar chill returned, seeping through the walls and curling around my ankles like icy fingers. I found myself avoiding certain areas of the house after dark. The hallway leading to the basement, the small bedroom with the sticking window, the patch of floor in the living room where the boards groaned loudest. These avoidance patterns developed without conscious thought, driven by an instinctive warning system that grew stronger with each passing night. Monday morning brought another encounter with Mrs. Henderson, this time accompanied by her grandson, who delivered newspapers. She introduced him with forced cheerfulness, but her eyes kept darting toward my house, lingering on the upper windows. The boy's presence seemed to unsettle her, though he appeared perfectly ordinary, a gangly teenager with acne and headphones perpetually dangling around his neck. "You should be careful," she blurted out suddenly as I turned to go back inside. Some places hold on to their past. They don't let go easily. Before I could respond, she hurried away, practically dragging her grandson behind her. Back inside, I stared at the ceiling, wondering what secrets the house might be hiding in its attic or behind its walls. The idea of investigating further both terrified and intrigued me. Part of me wanted to confront whatever was causing these disturbances, to prove once and for all that my fears were groundless. Another part, deeper and more primal, whispered warnings that perhaps some mysteries were better left unsolved. Mrs. Henderson's cryptic warnings gnawed at me throughout the week, coloring every strange noise and cold spot with ominous significance. On Wednesday evening, after noticing that the basement door had opened itself again, I decided to visit her directly. The late spring air carried the scent of freshly cut grass as I crossed the street, rehearsing polite conversation starters in my head. Her blue house, with its neatly trimmed hedges and cheerful yellow shutters, seemed to mock my own residence's decrepit state. She answered my knock with surprising speed, as if she'd been waiting behind the door. "Come in, dear," she said, ushering me into a living room that smelled of lavender and lemon polish. Everything about her home spoke of order and care. The precise arrangement of photographs on the mantel, the matching throw pillows on the couch, the crystal vase of fresh flowers on the coffee table. It felt like stepping into another world compared to my chaotic, creaking house. "I wanted to thank you for your concern about my place." I began, accepting a cup of chamomile tea. "But I have to admit, you've got me curious. What exactly happened at 437 Maplewood?" Her hands trembled slightly as she poured her own tea. Not many folks know the full story anymore. Most who did have either passed on or moved away. She glanced toward the window, where sheer curtains fluttered gently in the evening breeze. "It started with the original owner, Mr. Alaric Thorne. He built that house in 1892, came into town with money and secrets, bought up several properties, but poured everything into that one house." The way she said secrets sent a shiver down my spine. What kind of secrets? He was interested in things most folks wouldn't touch. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "The occult, they say. Dark arts. Folks claim he had books delivered from all over Europe, Asia, South America. Strange languages, stranger symbols. At night, lights burned in every window, and sometimes..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes, people swore they saw figures moving behind the curtains when they knew for certain no one else was home." A car passed outside, its headlights briefly illuminating the room. Mrs. Henderson's face looked pale, almost translucent in the shifting light. Then there was the incident in 1903. A whole family rented the place, the Whitakers. They lasted 3 months before fleeing in the middle of the night, left everything behind, even their clothes. The father was heard babbling about things that shouldn't exist and doors that shouldn't open. Poor man ended up in the asylum. I sipped my tea, the warmth doing little to dispel the chill creeping up my spine. And after that, there were others. Some stayed longer than others. The Millers managed a year before selling the house at a loss. Said they kept hearing children laughing in the halls when their own kids were at school. The Petersons reported seeing their reflections in mirrors doing things they weren't, waving when they stood still, smiling when they frowned. She shook her head sadly. Each tenant left something behind, not physical things, but pieces of themselves. Fear, trauma, madness. The house had collected them. Her words hung heavy in the air between us. Outside, a dog barked in the distance, the sound carrying through the quiet neighborhood. Why didn't anyone tell me this before I moved in? I asked, trying to keep accusation from my voice. People don't like to talk about it, she admitted, especially since the last family, the Carters, disappeared completely in 1987, vanished without a trace. Police searched for weeks, but found nothing, not even their car. After that, the house sat empty for decades. Folks said it was cursed, that something evil lived there. The real estate agent probably didn't want to scare off potential buyers. We sat in silence for a moment, the grandfather clock in the corner ticking away precious seconds. Did Mr. Thorne ever leave any records, diaries, or letters? The question slipped out before I could stop it, betraying my growing obsession with uncovering the truth. Mrs. Henderson's expression darkened. There were rumors about a journal. Some say he recorded everything, the rituals, the incantations, the things he summoned. Others claim he destroyed it before he died. His death was suspicious too, found in the basement with symbols carved into the walls and floor. The official report said heart attack, but she trailed off, shaking her head. Best not to dwell on such things, dear. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. As I walked home, her words replayed in my mind. The streetlights cast long shadows across Maplewood Avenue, making a familiar path seem foreign and threatening. When I reached my porch, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The front door stood slightly ajar, though I was certain I'd locked it before leaving. The key still hung heavy in my pocket. Inside, I performed a thorough search, checking every room and closet. Nothing appeared disturbed, yet the air felt different, charged with energy that prickled against my skin. In the kitchen, I found a piece of paper on the counter that definitely hadn't been there when I left. It was blank except for a single word scrawled in what looked like pencil. Listen. The note's cryptic message haunted me through Thursday and Friday, its simple command echoing in my mind with every creak and groan of the house. By Saturday morning, I convinced myself it must have been some prank, maybe neighborhood kids, or even Mrs. Henderson testing my resolve. Yet the seed of doubt had taken root, sprouting tendrils of fear that wrapped around my thoughts and refused to let go. That afternoon, while attempting to organize the basement, I discovered something that made my blood run colder than the mysterious note. Behind a pile of dusty storage boxes, tucked into a narrow alcove beneath the staircase, lay a collection of objects that sent chills racing down my spine. Candles black as midnight, their wax hardened into grotesque shapes. A bundle of dried herbs tied with crimson string. Several leather-bound books whose spines bore symbols I couldn't begin to comprehend. And most disturbing of all, a wooden box containing what appeared to be human teeth. Yellow with age, but unmistakably human. I stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of magazines in my haste to retreat upstairs. The items suggested far more than mere eccentricity. They hinted at rituals, ceremonies, and practices that belonged in horror stories rather than suburban basements. My hands trembled as I called in sick to work on Monday, claiming a stomach bug I didn't have. Instead, I spent the day researching occult symbols online, trying to match them to those etched into the book's covers. Tuesday night brought the first truly terrifying occurrence. I'd fallen into an uneasy sleep, plagued by dreams of shadowy figures performing incomprehensible rites, when a deafening crash jolted me awake. The digital clock on my nightstand read 2:23 a.m., heart pounding. I grabbed my phone and crept into the hallway, its flashlight function casting harsh shadows on the walls. The source of the noise revealed itself immediately. The antique mirror in the hallway had shattered, its shards glittering malevolently across the floor. But that wasn't all. In the center of the destruction stood a perfect circle of unbroken glass, reflecting not my frightened face, but something else entirely. A figure cloaked in darkness, its features obscured yet undeniably humanoid, stared back at me with eyes that glowed faintly red. I blinked, rubbed my own eyes, but the image remained, unmoving, unblinking. When I finally found the courage to approach, the reflection vanished, leaving only my pale, terrified face staring back from the intact portion of mirror. Wednesday morning, I called in sick again, this time legitimately. Sleep had become impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure in the mirror, felt its gaze burning into my soul. During daylight hours, I obsessively cleaned and organized, hoping to impose some semblance of control over my environment. Yet the house fought back. Drawers opened themselves, books fell from shelves, and the temperature in certain rooms fluctuated wildly regardless of the thermostat setting. Thursday evening, desperate for answers, I visited the local historical society. The elderly volunteer on duty, Mr. Grayson, proved more forthcoming than I expected. "Ah, yes, the Thorn House," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Tragic business, that. Many believed Alaric Thorn opened a portal. Tried to contact beings from beyond our realm." He led me to a dusty archive cabinet, extracting a brittle newspaper clipping from 1895. The article detailed a series of disappearances in the area, all occurring within months of the house's completion. Local authorities suspected foul play, but no evidence ever surfaced. More disturbing were the witness accounts. Townspeople reporting shadowy figures in the woods behind the property, strange lights in the sky, an overwhelming sense of being watched. The final paragraph mentioned Thorne's increasing reclusiveness and erratic behavior before his mysterious death. Armed with this new information, I returned home determined to document every supernatural event. I set up a video camera in the hallway, positioned to capture the mirror. Motion detectors monitored the basement and attic entrances. Salt lines, recommended by numerous online forums, now bordered every window and door. The preparations exhausted me, but sleep remained elusive. Friday night. The house responded with unprecedented aggression. The cameras captured nothing concrete, yet the footage revealed subtle distortions. Shadows moving where none should exist, brief flashes of light in empty rooms. The motion detectors triggered constantly, their alarms creating a cacophony that eventually caused my neighbors to call the police. Officers found nothing amiss, though Officer Martinez gave me a concerned look when I explained about the disturbances. "You sure you're okay here?" he asked, standing in my doorway. We've had other reports from this address over the years, people saying they felt unwelcome. His words confirmed what I begun to suspect. My experiences weren't unique. The house had been tormenting tenants for over a century, feeding on their fear and doubt. As the officers departed, I noticed something chilling. The salt lines I'd painstakingly laid were now broken in multiple places, though I hadn't touched them since placing them. Saturday morning, I found another note on my kitchen counter. This time, written in what appeared to be blood, were 2 words: "Leave now." The liquid was still wet, dripping slowly onto the tile floor. My rational mind screamed that this must be some elaborate prank, but my instincts told me otherwise. The house wanted me gone, and it was escalating its efforts to drive me away. Sunday morning arrived with a clarity that felt almost mocking. Sunlight streamed to the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in golden beams. The house seemed almost peaceful, its malevolent presence momentarily subdued. This deceptive calm propelled me toward action. I needed answers, and I needed them now. If Alaric Thorn had indeed documented his activities, those records might hold the key to understanding, perhaps even controlling whatever force inhabited my home. Armed with gloves and a flashlight, I descended into the basement once more. The air grew heavier with each step, pressing against my chest like an invisible weight. The hidden alcove beneath the staircase beckoned, its darkness promising revelations I wasn't sure I wanted. Pushing aside the occult paraphernalia I discovered earlier, I began systematically searching every inch of available space. Behind a loose brick in the wall, I found it, a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and stiff with age. The pages smelled of mildew and something sharper metallic. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing cramped handwriting that filled every available space. The first entry dated back to 1892, shortly after Thorne's arrival in town. March 14, 1892. Construction proceeds according to plan. The geometry of the house aligns perfectly with the ley lines. Few understand the significance of this location, its proximity to the veil between worlds. They think me mad for building so far from town, but isolation is necessary for what must be done. The entries continued in similar fashion, detailing increasingly disturbing experiments and rituals. Thorne described contacting entities he referred to only as the Watchers, beings that existed beyond human comprehension. He documented their communications through automatic writing, recording messages that made my head ache just reading them. The boundary weakens. Prepare the vessel, for corners must align with blood and bone. The stars will guide when the time comes. Diagrams accompany these notes, intricate patterns combining astrological symbols with geometric shapes. One particularly disturbing page contained what appeared to be a family tree, but instead of names, each branch terminated in symbols matching those I'd seen on the books in the basement. At the base of the tree, a single phrase repeated itself in block letters. The door will open. Thorne's later entries grew increasingly erratic, his handwriting deteriorating into frantic scrawls. June 19th, 1895. They speak to me constantly now. Their voices echo through the halls, even when I seal myself in study. The servants have fled, claiming madness, but they do not understand. The sacrifice must be pure, willing. The child... The sentence ended abruptly, the rest of the page torn away. Several subsequent entries reference the child, though whether his own or someone else's remained unclear. The final complete entry chilled me to my core. September 3rd, 1895. It begins. The alignment is perfect. Tonight, when the moon reaches its zenith, I shall perform the final ritual. The door will open and they will come through. Should I fail, the house will remember. It will wait. The journal's remaining pages were blank, save for a single drop of dried blood staining the last sheet. Closing it, I noticed something I had missed initially. A small compartment in the back cover. Inside lay a photograph, faded but still recognizable. It showed Thorne standing beside a young girl, no older than 10, both dressed in formal 19th century attire. The girl's eyes, however, weren't focused on the camera. They stared past it, wide with terror, her mouth open in a silent scream. Upstairs, the house reacted violently to my discovery. The lights flickered, though no storm clouds gathered outside. The temperature plummeted, frost forming on the basement windows despite the warm spring air. From somewhere deep within the walls came a sound like distant chanting, voices overlapping in languages I couldn't identify. I clutched the journal to my chest, realizing too late that I'd awakened something by removing its resting place. Rushing upstairs, I spread the journal's contents across my kitchen table, cross-referencing Thorne's notes with modern occult literature I downloaded onto my laptop. Patterns emerged. Specific dates aligned with celestial events, particular arrangements of symbols corresponding to documented demonic sigils. Most disturbing was the realization that several of the rituals Thorne described matched accounts from other haunted locations worldwide, suggesting a network of similar attempts to breach the veil between worlds. The journal referenced a specific room in the house, the Chamber of Echoes, where Thorne conducted his most potent workings. Comparing his descriptions to my own knowledge of the house's layout, I realized it must be the smallest bedroom upstairs, the one with the perpetually stuck window. The room's dimensions, when measured precisely, matched the geometric specifications Thorne had noted as optimal for channeling otherworldly energies. As I worked, documenting connections and patterns, the house's manifestations intensified. Objects flew from shelves, smashing against walls. The chandelier in the dining room swung wildly, its crystals chiming discordantly. Yet I couldn't tear myself away from the horrifying puzzle pieces falling into place before me. Each revelation brought new questions, new terrors, but also a growing understanding of the force I faced. Most chilling of all was Thorne's final warning, repeated throughout the journal's latter pages. Once opened, the door cannot be closed. It waits, patient beyond comprehension. Mark my words, the house remembers. It will never forget. Monday morning dawned with an unnatural stillness. The house, perhaps exhausted from its nocturnal tantrum, lay dormant, its oppressive silence more unnerving than its previous chaos. The journal's revelations weighed heavily on my mind, each remembered detail digging deeper into my consciousness, like splinters I couldn't remove. I found myself pacing the perimeter of the Chamber of Echoes, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet that had somehow appeared overnight, though I distinctly remembered bare floorboards yesterday. The room's transformation unsettled me. Wallpaper I'd never noticed before covered the walls, a repeating pattern of interlocking circles and triangles, identical to the diagrams in Thorne's journal. The air smelled of ozone and something floral, sickly sweet. When I pressed my ear to the wall, I heard it, a low murmur, like dozens of voices whispering simultaneously in languages I couldn't understand. The sound seemed to originate from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating through the very structure of the house. Work became impossible to focus on. At the office, my colleagues commented on my distracted state, though they attributed it to stress from the move. During meetings, I caught myself sketching the symbols from the journal's pages, their forms emerging from my pen without conscious direction. My boss, Mr. Carter, pulled me aside after lunch. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Sarah. Maybe take a personal day." The irony of his name, shared with a family that had vanished from my house, struck me with physical force. I stammered an excuse about adjusting to the new place, but his concerned expression followed me out of the building. Walking home, I noticed people crossing the street to avoid passing my house, their eyes sliding away from its windows, as if afraid to look directly at it. That night, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They followed me through the halls, gathering volume and intensity as I approached the chamber of echoes. Standing in its doorway, I understood why Thorne had chosen this room. The angles created by the wallpaper's design seemed to shift when, viewed peripherally, the geometric patterns rearranging themselves into impossible shapes. The air pressure changed noticeably as I crossed the threshold, my ears popping as if ascending rapidly in altitude. In the center of the room, the carpet formed a perfect circle, its fibers arranged in a spiral pattern that drew my gaze inward. Against every instinct screaming at me to leave, I knelt and pressed my palm against the floor. The temperature dropped instantly, frost forming on the fibers. The whispers coalesced into distinct syllables, though their meaning remained just beyond comprehension. My breath fogged the air as I strained to understand, my fingers tracing the spiral pattern unconsciously. Suddenly, the room's dimensions seemed to stretch and warp. The walls receded impossibly far while the ceiling pressed lower, creating a crushing claustrophobia that made my chest tighten. The whispers transformed into laughter, high-pitched and cruel, coming from all directions simultaneously. I scrambled backward, hitting the opposite wall with enough force to knock a framed photograph to the floor. Its glass shattered, revealing not the landscape scene I had purchased at a thrift store, but another image entirely. The same young girl from Thorne's photograph, her terrified eyes staring directly at me. The impact jarred something loose in my memory. Flashes of scenes I'd never witnessed flooded my mind. Hooded figures chanting around a stone altar, a child's anguished cries echoing through cavernous halls, blood pooling in intricate patterns on wooden floors. These weren't memories, I realized with growing horror. They were visions, fragments of the house's past bleeding into my consciousness. Each image brought a corresponding physical sensation. The rough texture of ceremonial robes against my skin, the coppery taste of blood in my mouth, the overwhelming stench of sulfur and burnt hair. Gasping, I staggered from the room, slamming the door behind me. The hallway's familiar length provided momentary relief, though I noticed new details. Scratches in the woodwork forming patterns similar to those in the chamber, faint discolorations on the wallpaper that might have been handprints. The house seemed alive, its very substance responding to my presence with increasing hostility. In the kitchen, I found more changes. The cabinets now contained jars of herbs and powders whose labels had faded to illegibility, though their contents emitted familiar odors from Thorne's basement stash. The refrigerator's interior had transformed into a reflective surface, showing not my reflection but glimpses of other rooms, other times. I slammed it shut, heart pounding, only to find the calendar on the wall had rewritten itself. Dates from 1895 now filled its squares, each marked with symbols matching those in the journal. Desperate for normalcy, I turned on the television, hoping background noise might drown out the house's increasingly aggressive manifestations. Instead, the screen displayed static-filled images of my living room from impossible angles, showing furniture arrangements that hadn't existed in decades. Figures moved at the edges of the frames, shadowy forms that disappeared when I tried to focus on them directly. The telephone rang, its shrill sound making me jump. Caller ID showed no number, but I answered anyway, driven by some masochistic need to confront whatever entities sought to communicate. A child's voice, distorted and layered with others, whispered a single sentence before the line went dead. "He's coming back." Exhaustion hit me like a physical blow. My body felt leaden, my thoughts sluggish and disjointed. Yet sleep remained impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, the visions returned, more vivid, more invasive. I saw myself participating in rituals, heard my voice speaking incantations in languages I'd never learned. The boundaries between past and present dissolved, leaving me adrift in a sea of borrowed memories and impending dread. Dawn brought no respite. The house's transformations accelerated, rooms shifting and changing when I wasn't looking. Doors appeared where walls had been solid. Hallways stretched impossibly long before snapping back to their original dimensions. My own reflection had become unreliable, sometimes showing me as I was, sometimes as someone else entirely. A woman in 19th century dress, her eyes hollow with despair. The whispers followed me constantly now, their volume modulated with my emotional state. Stress or fear caused them crescendo into deafening roars, while a moment of calm reduced them to barely audible murmurs. I began wearing earplugs constantly, though the sounds penetrated even those barriers, resonating directly in my skull. Food tasted wrong, its flavors altered subtly but persistently. Water from the taps carried an oily film, its surface tension broken by patterns that matched the wallpaper's designs. My clothes changed overnight. Buttons rearranged themselves into symbolic patterns. Fabric colors shifted to match the house's evolving palette. Even my skin seemed affected, developing fine traceries of raised lines that formed geometric shapes matching Thorne's diagrams. Reality itself appeared to be unraveling around me. Time flowed inconsistently. Minutes stretched into hours, while entire days seemed to pass in the blink of an eye. The seasons outside my windows fluctuated erratically. Snow falling one moment, summer heat blazing the next. Neighbors stopped acknowledging my existence entirely, their gazes sliding past me as if I'd become part of the house's fabric. Yet through all these changes, one constant remained, the growing certainty that something was returning. The house prepared for it, its manifestations taking on quality of anticipation. The whispers became chants, the cold spots organized into patterns. The dimensional shifts occurred with mathematical precision. Whatever had been summoned or trapped within these walls during Thorne's final ritual was coming back, and the house remembered exactly how to welcome it home. Tuesday morning found me hunched over the journal in the Chamber of Echoes, its pages seeming to glow in inner light despite the room's perpetual twilight. The house's manifestations had evolved from random chaos into precise, calculated movements, objects rearranging themselves into specific configurations, temperatures fluctuating in measurable patterns, sounds forming coherent sequences. Each change aligned perfectly with Thorne's meticulous documentation, as if the house itself were following an invisible script. The journal's final section detailed the Great Working, a ceremony designed to permanently bridge the veil between worlds. Thorne's notes became increasingly technical, referencing astronomical alignments, sacred geometries, and biological components that made my stomach churn. He described how the house itself served as the primary focus, its architecture calibrated to resonate with frequencies beyond human perception. The Chamber of Echoes functioned as the ritual's epicenter, its dimensions and materials specifically chosen to amplify and contain the forces involved. Most disturbing were the biological requirements. Thorne specified that the ritual required a vessel of pure essence, untainted by worldly corruption. His earlier references to a child now made horrific sense. The geometric patterns in the wallpaper, the spiral on the chamber floor, even the frost formations on the window panes, all incorporated measurements derived from human proportions, child-sized proportions. The ritual's timing centered around lunar phases and planetary alignments, with Thorne noting that successful completion required exact synchronization. He'd chosen September 3rd, 1895, because multiple celestial bodies would align perfectly with the house's terrestrial coordinates. Reading his calculations, I realized with mounting dread that another such alignment would occur in exactly 3 days, the autumnal equinox, when day and night balanced equally. Cross-referencing Thorne's astronomical data with modern charts confirmed his calculations. The house's current behavior, its increased activity, the dimensional shifts, the rising intensity of manifestations, all corresponded precisely with the predictions for the days leading up to the ritual. The house wasn't merely remembering. It was preparing, its very structure attuning itself to cosmic harmonics like a massive tuning fork. Details emerge that explain the house's persistent phenomena. The cold spots mapped to points in Thorne's diagrams marking convergent zones, areas where dimensions intersected most readily. The whispers corresponded to resonance frequencies he documented, describing them as the voices of watchers awaiting their invitation. Even the spontaneous rearrangement of objects followed specific patterns he'd outlined for pre-ritual calibration. The journal revealed why previous tenants had experienced such consistent manifestations. Thorne had designed the house to essentially function as a living entity, its materials infused with compounds that maintained its structural integrity and supernatural properties indefinitely. Certain pages contain chemical formulas for treating wood, metal, and stone to preserve their ability to channel and contain otherworldly energies. The house literally fed on fear and belief, growing stronger with each occupant's terror. Most chilling was Thorne's explanation for the house's selective haunting. He had incorporated what he called psychometric filters, mechanisms that identified individuals susceptible to influence based on genetic markers and psychological profiles. The house actively tested its occupants, manifesting phenomena tailored to their deepest fears and vulnerabilities. Those who resisted too strongly were driven away, while those who succumbed became part of the cycle, their energies fueling the house's power. The journal contained instructions for disrupting the ritual, though Thorne had clearly documented them reluctantly, as if compelled by some external force. These countermeasures require precise actions performed at specific locations throughout the house, synchronized with the ritual's progression. Failure to execute any component correctly would result in catastrophic consequences, potentially strengthening the house's connection to whatever dimension it accessed. I spent hours committing these procedures to memory, knowing that written records might be compromised or destroyed. The countermeasures involved manipulating the house's own systems against it, redirecting energy flows, disrupting harmonic resonances, and severing dimensional links at critical junctures. Thorne warned that these actions would provoke violent responses from the house, which would fight to protect its purpose. Wednesday brought confirmation of the house's awareness. As I moved through prescribed preparations, subtle changes rippled through its structure. The wallpaper's pattern shifted slightly, attempting to mislead my measurements. Floorboards warped to alter distances between ritual points. Even gravity seemed to fluctuate, making precise positioning increasingly difficult. The house knew what I intended and actively worked to prevent it. The whispers grew into distinct voices, speaking in languages I recognized from the journal's incantations. They offered bargains, promises of power and knowledge if I would abandon my plans. Shadows formed into recognizable shapes, hooded figures gesturing toward the Chamber of Echoes, inviting me to join there. Thursday morning arrived with an oppressive weight in the air, as if the atmosphere itself had thickened around the house. The preparations I had made according to Thorne's countermeasures seemed to mock me now. Salt circles that shimmered unnaturally, protective sigils drawn in chalk that glowed faintly in the dim light, and bundles of herbs hanging from doorways like grotesque decorations. Each component felt simultaneously powerful and pathetically inadequate against the force gathering within the walls. The house responded to my preparations with escalating hostility. Floorboards buckled and warped, creating treacherous paths through rooms I'd once navigated easily. The dimensional shifts became more pronounced and unpredictable, sometimes stretching hallways into impossible lengths or compressing spaces until they felt claustrophobic. Doors materialized where none had existed before, leading to darkened corridors that vanished when approached too closely. The very geometry of the space seemed to rebel against my attempts to impose order upon it. In the Chamber of Echoes, the spiral pattern on the floor now pulsed faintly, its frost-covered surface radiating cold that penetrated even thermal clothing. The whispers had transformed into a constant chorus, their volume modulated with my proximity to the room. When I attempted to adjust the placement of protective items according to Thorne's specifications, the objects moved themselves, rearranging into configurations that matched the house's original design rather than my countermeasures. Physical manifestations intensified throughout the day. Shadows detached from their sources, slithering across walls and floors with purposeful movements. Inanimate objects developed disturbing behaviors. The chandelier's crystals rotated independently, casting fractured rainbows across the dining room. Kitchen utensils vibrated and clattered together in complex rhythms. Books flew from shelves to form stacks in precise geometric patterns. The house seemed to breathe differently, its settling noises replaced by deep, resonant groans that vibrated through my bones. Time itself began to fracture. My watch ran backward for hours at a time, then accelerated wildly before resetting to normal speed. The sun appeared to move erratically across the sky, casting shadows at impossible angles. Clocks throughout the house displayed different times, some frozen at significant moments in the journal's history, others counting down to the impending ritual. I caught glimpses of myself in mirrors performing actions I hadn't yet done, or wearing clothes I hadn't put on, suggesting temporal loops or echoes bleeding into the present. The biological effects worsened. My skin bore visible marks now, raised lines forming intricate patterns that matched both Thorne's diagrams and the house's wallpaper designs. My reflection showed signs of aging rapidly, then regressing to childhood, before stabilizing again. Food and water carried increasingly potent flavors and textures, sometimes tasting of metal or ash, other times dissolving into nothingness upon contact with my tongue. Sleep deprivation manifested physically, with dark circles under my eyes and trembling hands. Yet exhaustion never brought actual rest. Most alarming were the changes in my perception. Colors shifted subtly, revealing wavelengths invisible to normal human vision. Sound separated into distinct layers, allowing me to identify multiple overlapping frequencies in the house's ambient noise. Touch became hypersensitive, registering minute vibrations in the air and detecting temperature variations others would never notice. These enhancements felt like the house was rewiring my senses, preparing me for something I couldn't yet comprehend. The entities watching from the corners of existence grew bolder. Their forms became more defined, tall, gaunt figures wrapped in darkness, their eyes burning with cold light. They appeared in peripheral vision, always just beyond direct line of sight, but their presence pressed against my awareness like a physical weight. Sometimes I caught reflections of them in windows or shiny surfaces, their distorted shapes reaching toward me with elongated limbs. As night fell, the house's preparation reached a fever pitch. Lights throughout the structure flickered in complex sequences, spelling out messages in binary code that translated to warnings or demands when decoded. Temperature fluctuations created visible vapor trails from my breath. Even in warm rooms, the protective measures I'd implemented began to fail systematically. Salt circles crumbled into dust, sigils faded from walls, and herbal bundles dried up completely, their scents dissipating into nothingness. The chamber of echoes transformed dramatically. The spiral on the floor now glowed with inner light, its frost spreading outward in fractal patterns that climbed walls and ceiling. The air pressure changed dramatically, making my ears pop and causing pain in my sinuses. The whispers became a deafening roar, layering languages and voices into a cacophony that vibrated through every molecule of air. Objects levitated and orbited the room's center in precise mathematical patterns, occasionally colliding with explosive force. I found myself drawn to the chamber despite every instinct screaming to flee. The house pulled at me with irresistible force, each step toward the room feeling simultaneously voluntary and compelled. As I crossed the threshold, reality bent and twisted around me. Dimensions folded inward, creating impossible perspectives where walls met at angles that shouldn't exist. Time slowed to a crawl, each heartbeat echoing like thunder in the charged atmosphere. At the spiral's center, something waited, not quite visible, not entirely physical, but undeniably present. Its outline shifted constantly, reforming into different shapes that defied logic and physics. The air crackled with energy, raising the hairs on my arms and neck. A low vibration resonated through the floorboards, matching the frequency of the whispers that had haunted me since moving in. The entity, or perhaps the house itself, acknowledged my presence with a surge of power that nearly knocked me off my feet. 3 days, 72 hours until the alignment. The house remembered everything. Every ritual, every sacrifice, every terrified occupant who had fled its halls. It prepared to welcome back whatever had been summoned or trapped during Thorne's final working. And it wanted me to participate, to complete the cycle he had begun over a century ago. Friday dawned with violence that shattered what remained of my tenuous grip on reality. The house no longer bothered with subtle manipulations or gradual transformations. It attacked with primal ferocity, its manifestations becoming physical assaults that battered both my body and mind. Every attempt to reinforce the countermeasures resulted in immediate sabotage. Each movement I made triggered corresponding reactions that amplified the chaos exponentially. The morning began with the sound of breaking glass. Every window in the house shattering simultaneously, though no external force or weather condition could explain it. Shard hung suspended in midair, rotating slowly before embedding themselves in walls and furniture with surgical precision. The resulting vacuum sucked papers and lightweight objects toward the empty frames, creating miniature tornadoes that danced through rooms before dissipating into nothingness. My attempts to stabilize the environment proved futile. Lighting candles for protection caused electrical fires that extinguished themselves before spreading, leaving behind charred symbols on walls that matched those in Thorne's journal. Drawing new sigils in chalk resulted in the implements snapping between my fingers, their fragments arranging themselves into mocking caricatures of protective symbols. Even speaking incantations aloud caused the words to echo back distorted, their syllables rearranged into guttural phrases that sent shockwaves through the air. The dimensional instability reached critical levels. Rooms folded into themselves, their content stacked impossibly within finite spaces. Ceilings stretched away into infinity, while floors compressed into dense, unyielding surfaces. Doorways led to locations that defied physics. Infinite staircases spiraling in both directions, halls that looped back on themselves after 3 steps, entire landscapes compressed into closet-sized spaces. Attempting to navigate the shifting maze risked permanent disorientation, or worse, becoming trapped in a pocket dimension that might never release its prisoners. Physical manifestations evolved into direct attacks. Shadowy tendrils lashed out from walls and furniture, leaving welts that burned with supernatural cold. Invisible forces pushed and pulled at me, preventing access to crucial areas while herding me toward the Chamber of Echoes. Objects hurled themselves with deadly accuracy, narrowly missing vital areas but striking with enough force to bruise and cut. Blood trickled from my nose and ears as the atmospheric pressure fluctuated wildly, making breathing difficult and painful. The entity's presence grew overwhelming. Its form solidified slightly, becoming visible as a shifting mass of darkness that absorbed light and sound. Eyes materialized within its bulk, glowing with colors that hurt to look at directly. Limbs extended and retracted erratically, sometimes manifesting physical appendages that left scorched marks on floors and walls. The air around it rippled like heat waves, distorting vision and warping reality in its vicinity. Time collapsed completely. Hours passed in seconds, minutes stretched into eternity. I witnessed events unfolding in reverse, while experiencing forward momentum simultaneously. Past and future versions of myself appeared briefly, their actions hinting at outcomes I desperately hoped to avoid. The calendar pages fluttered wildly, dates changing randomly before settling on September 3rd. The ritual date repeating endlessly regardless of actual time passed. Biological effects became life-threatening. My body temperature fluctuated dangerously, causing violent shivering followed by profuse sweating. Heart palpitations threatened to become arrhythmia, while blood vessels near the surface of my skin visibly pulsed with unnatural rhythm. The patterns etched into my flesh glowed faintly, their raised lines growing more pronounced until they broke the skin, leaking blood that formed additional symbols on my clothing and surroundings. Mental defenses crumbled under relentless assault. The whispering voices synchronized into a single, deafening roar that penetrated every thought and sensation. Memories became unreliable. Scenes from Thorne's journal overlapped with my own experiences, making it impossible to distinguish past from present. Hallucinations manifested physically, forcing me to question every sensory input. The boundary between self and house dissolved, leaving me unsure where my consciousness ended and the building's awareness began. Yet through this maelstrom of terror, clarity emerged. The house wasn't merely attacking. It tested me, probing weaknesses and strengths alike. Each failed countermeasure revealed flaws in Thorne's original instructions, suggesting alternative approaches that might succeed where it had fallen short. The entity's aggression followed discernible patterns, its movements dictated by the same cosmic harmonics that powered the ritual itself. Even my deteriorating condition provided insights. The physical symptoms align with specific stages of the approaching alignment, offering potential windows of opportunity. Armed with these revelations, I adjusted my strategy. Rather than fighting the house's transformations, I worked with them, using its dimensional shifts to access hidden spaces containing forgotten components of Thorn's original workings. The injuries sustained from physical manifestations suggested optimal timing for certain actions, while the temporal distortions revealed crucial information about the ritual's progression. Each setback, each failure, contributed to a deeper understanding of the forces at play. The Chamber of Echoes served as both battleground and laboratory. Within its confines, I conducted experiments that would have been impossible elsewhere, manipulating energies that existed beyond normal physics, observing phenomena that defied scientific explanation, and documenting interactions between material and immaterial realms. The entity's presence, while terrifying, provided invaluable data about the nature of the threat and how to combat it effectively. 72 hours remained until the alignment, but time meant little in the face of escalating chaos. The house's fury increased with each successful adaptation, its attacks growing more sophisticated and coordinated. Yet with each challenge overcome, with each insight gained, hope flickered brighter. The possibility that understanding might lead to victory, however temporary, against forces ancient and incomprehensible. Saturday night descended like a suffocating blanket, the hours bleeding together in a kaleidoscope of terror and revelation. The house had become a living organism, its every surface pulsing with malevolent energy. The Chamber of Echoes stood at the heart of this transformation, its spiral now a vortex of light and shadow that threatened to consume reality itself. As midnight approached, I gathered the remnants of my courage and stepped across the threshold, knowing that retreat was no longer an option. The air inside the chamber felt solid, pressing against me with physical force. My breath came in shallow gasps as I activated the first stage of Thorn's countermeasures, modified through hard-won experience. Chanting the revised incantation, I traced a new pattern in the air with a piece of chalk infused with protective herbs. Instead of crumbling as before, the symbols held firm, glowing with a steady blue light that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. The entity reacted violently, its form solidifying into something almost tangible. Towering above me, it resolved into a humanoid shape wreathed in writhing shadows, its eyes burning with cold fire that illuminated the chamber in strobing flashes. Multiple limbs extended and retracted erratically, testing the boundaries of protective circle I'd established. When one tendril breached the barrier, searing pain shot to my arm, but the symbol held barely. Progressing to the second stage required precise timing with the house's dimensional shifts. As the walls began their familiar folding, I positioned myself at a calculated intersection point. The air pressure changed dramatically, threatening to crush my lungs, but this exact moment allowed access to the house's structural essence. Placing my palms flat against the vibrating wall, I focused on the patterns etched into my skin, channeling their energy into the building itself. The house screamed in response, a sound that transcended mere noise and burrowed directly into my brain. Wallpaper peeled away, revealing raw beneath that pulse like living tissue. The geometric patterns carved into the walls glowed red-hot, their lines flowing like liquid metal. I maintained contact despite the burning sensation in my hands, forcing my will against the house's resistance. For several agonizing minutes, we struggled in this impasse, neither gaining nor losing ground. Then came the third and most dangerous phase, severing the dimensional link that anchored the entity to our reality. This required entering the spiral center, where gravity reversed and time flowed. Backward, each step toward the vortex felt like walking through molasses, my body resisting movement, while my mind processed sensations in reverse order. The entity loomed closer, its features resolving into horrifying detail. A face that shifted between countless terrified expressions, mouths opening in silent screams along its length. Reaching the center, I activated the final component. A crystal sphere recovered from Thorn's basement collection, now charged with counterharmonic frequencies. Placing it in the exact geometric center of the spiral, I initiated the closing sequence. The house fought back with everything it had. Floors buckled and cracked, walls exploded outward in slow motion, and the air temperature plummeted to Arctic levels. My lips split and bled as I forced out the closing incantation, each word tearing through my vocal cords like broken glass. The entity surged forward, attempting to maintain its connection. Its shadowy form filled the chamber, pressing against the collapsing dimensions with desperate strength. I saw flashes of what it truly was, not a single being but a conglomeration of countless entities, each fighting to remain in our reality. Their collective agony manifested as physical pressure that threatened to crush me, but I held firm, channeling all my remaining strength into the crystal. Reality itself seemed to unravel at the edges. Colors bled together. Sounds merged into a single deafening note, and the very fabric of space-time stretched thin enough to glimpse what lay beyond. Through this veil, I saw endless voids filled with watching eyes, vast landscapes of geometric impossibilities, and rivers of light that defied physics. The knowledge of these realms burned in my mind, threatening madness with every passing second. With a sound that could have been either triumph or despair, the link finally severed. The vortex collapsed inward, pulling the entity with it in a rush of displaced air that threw me against the far wall. The chamber's walls snapped back to their original configuration, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted instantly. Silence descended, profound and absolute, broken only by my ragged breathing. For several minutes, I lay there, unable to process what had happened. The house felt different. The malevolent presence had vanished, leaving behind only echoes of its former self. The wallpaper patterns faded to normal designs, and the spiral on the floor melted away like frost in sunlight. Yet I knew better than to trust this apparent victory. The house still stood, its memories intact, waiting for another opportunity to fulfill its purpose. Examining the aftermath revealed both success and lingering danger. The protective symbols remained active, their glow now steady and reassuring. The crystal sphere had shattered, its fragments scattered across the floor, each piece still humming with residual energy. Most telling was a change in the house's structure. Certain walls and floors now displayed visible scars, as if wounded by the conflict. These marks would never heal completely, serving as permanent reminders of what had transpired. But the entity's departure hadn't been clean. Faint traces lingered in corners and shadows, like smoke reluctant to dissipate. The dimensional anchors, while severed, left behind sensitive points that might serve as weak spots in the future. And deep within the house's essence, I sensed a core resistance, a fundamental aspect of the building that refused to accept defeat, that continued to remember and wait. As dawn approached, I documented everything. The modifications of Thorne's procedures, the house's responses, and the entity's true nature. These records needed preservation, not just of my own understanding, but for whoever might follow. Because despite my victory, I knew the house would never forget. It would continue to exist, to gather strength, to prepare for another attempt. And when that time came, someone else would have to face what I had barely survived. Sunday morning brought an artificial calm, like the eye of a hurricane that refused to acknowledge its own destruction. The house stood quiet, its previous malevolence reduced to mere echoes that whispered through empty halls. Yet these remnants carried their own form of horror, subtle movements in peripheral vision, faint temperature fluctuations that raised goosebumps, and the occasional soft thud from unknown sources. Packing became a surreal experience. Each item collected triggering memories of the house's transformation from ordinary residence to gateway of nightmares. Boxes refused to close properly, their contents shifting and rearranging themselves when my back was turned. Photographs taken for insurance purposes captured figures in backgrounds that hadn't been there during shooting. Even the removal truck's engine sputtered and died twice before finally starting, as if the house resisted relinquishing its latest occupant. Neighbors watched from their windows, their faces carefully neutral, though Mrs. Henderson's expression held unmistakable relief when she saw me loading the last box. Driving away, I expected relief to flood through me, but instead found only hollow exhaustion. The rear-view mirror showed 437, Maplewood Avenue shrinking into the distance, its peeling paint and sagging porch appearing deceptively normal. Yet something about its silhouette seemed wrong. The angle slightly off, the shadows falling at impossible degrees, even in broad daylight. At the corner, I swore I saw movement in the upstairs window, though I'd already secured the house and returned the keys to the real estate agent. That night, in a hotel room miles away. Sleep proved elusive. The bed felt unfamiliar, its mattress too soft and springs too loud compared to the house's familiar creaks. But the silence proved worse. Without the house's constant background noise, every tiny sound seemed magnified, every shadow more defined. I kept expecting the temperature to drop suddenly, or the lights to flicker, or the whispers to begin again. When none of these occurred, the anticipation became almost worse than the actual manifestations had been. Monday morning brought work obligations, colleagues asking casual questions about my new place. Their normalcy felt alien, their concerns about commute times and neighborhood amenities trivial compared to what I'd experienced. During meetings, I caught myself sketching the house's floor plan, noting dimensional anomalies and weak points with clinical detachment. The journal's pages replayed in my mind constantly. Each diagram and incantation burned into memory despite having destroyed the physical document. Physical recovery progressed slowly. Bruises faded but left behind strange discolorations that matched the house's wallpaper patterns. The raised lines on my skin remained, though they no longer glowed. Doctors attributed my persistent fatigue and occasional nosebleeds to stress and lack of sleep, prescribing rest and vitamins. None noticed how my eyes tracked movements in empty spaces, or how I flinch at sudden noises, or how I compulsively check corners for watching eyes. Research consumed my free time. Local libraries yielded frustratingly little about Alaric Thorne or his activities, confirming Mrs. Henderson's claim about lost archives. Online occult forums provided mixed information. Some users dismissed my account as fabrication, while others offered chilling corroborations of similar experiences worldwide. Several warned against sharing details publicly, claiming attention attracted unwanted interest from those who understood such matters too well. Dreams became increasingly vivid, blurring the line between memory and imagination. I walked through the house's halls, witnessing events from different perspectives, seeing myself performing rituals, watching previous tenants flee in terror, observing Thorne conduct his final working. These visions felt more authentic than waking reality, their details too precise to dismiss as mere dreams. Sometimes I woke to find notes beside my bed, written in my handwriting, but containing information I didn't consciously know. The entity's influence lingered in unexpected ways. Certain sounds, particularly resonant frequencies matching the house's harmonic signature, triggered instant anxiety. Geometric patterns similar to the wallpaper's design caused physical discomfort, while exposure to specific combinations of herbs replicated the house's distinctive scent. Most disturbing were the moments of temporal dislocation, brief episodes where time seemed to skip or reverse, leaving me momentarily disoriented. Attempt to move on proved futile. New housing options felt wrong, their dimensions and layouts incompatible with the heightened awareness the house had forced upon me. Friends complained about my distracted behavior, how I constantly scanned rooms for potential weak spots or countermeasures. Work performance suffered as I struggled to focus on mundane tasks while hyper-aware of environmental details others couldn't perceive. Yet amid this lingering trauma, insights emerged. Patterns recognized in the house's behavior revealed themselves in other contexts. Architectural features that hinted at similar purposes, historical accounts that paralleled Thorne's activities, cultural practices incorporating elements I now understood differently. The experience had rewired my perception, granting understanding that couldn't be unlearned or ignored. Each night, as I tried to sleep in yet another temporary accommodation, I listened for familiar sounds. The absence of manifestations felt louder than their presence ever had. Without the house's constant testing, I questioned whether I could maintain the heightened state necessary to recognize threats. The entity's final words echoed in my mind. We will meet again. Not a threat, but a promise. One I knew the house would keep, given enough time and the right circumstances. 2 weeks later, settled into a sterile apartment complex where nothing creaked and every unit mirrored its neighbor, I received a package with no return address. Inside lay a single photograph, the same image from Thorne's journal, showing him with the terrified child. But now the girl's face had changed. She stared directly at the camera, her expression no longer one of fear, but of warning. On the back, written in familiar handwriting that wasn't mine, were 2 words. It remembers. That night, As I lay in bed listening to the maddening silence of modern construction, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps ascending wooden stairs that no longer existed. They moved with deliberate purpose, pausing outside what would have been my bedroom door in the old house. The temperature dropped sharply, and I felt the mattress depressed slightly, as if something heavy had settled beside me. In that moment, I understood the true nature of the house's curse. It wasn't confined to 437 Maplewood Avenue. It existed within me now, encoded in the patterns etched into my skin, preserved in the memories burned into my mind. The house had marked me as its own, ensuring that wherever I went, part of it traveled with me. The footsteps continued their measured approach, stopping just short of my current location. Real estate listings caught my eye more frequently now. Properties described as charming and full of character, houses with histories that raised warning flags I could no longer ignore. Agents called regularly, their voices carrying the same forced cheerfulness I'd heard before moving into Maplewood Avenue. Each offer came with subtle pressures, hints about perfect alignments and unique opportunities that set my teeth on edge. The photograph sat on my nightstand, its image changing subtly when viewed indirectly. Sometimes the girl appeared alone, standing in front of the house. Other times, additional figures joined her, shadowy shapes that resolved into previous tenants, their faces bearing expressions of shared understanding. The message was clear. The house collected its stories, preserving them for future occupants. Professional life became increasingly difficult. Deadlines slipped as I found myself compulsively researching properties worldwide, identifying architectural features that matched Thorne's specifications. Articles crossed my desk detailing mysterious disappearances and unexplained phenomena, each one triggering flashbacks to the Chamber of Echoes. My editor noticed a pattern, suggesting maybe I'd found my niche in paranormal reporting. The irony tasted bitter. Physical symptoms persisted, evolving into new manifestations. The patterns on my skin shifted, forming different arrangements that suggested coordinates or dates. Headaches struck with increasing frequency, bringing visions of places I'd never visited but somehow recognized. Sleep remained elusive, interrupted by dreams that felt more like surveillance footage from the house's perspective, watching new tenants test its boundaries. Mrs. Henderson called unexpectedly, her voice trembling with urgency. "They've rented it again," she whispered. "A young family. Moved in yesterday." She paused and added, "Their little girl looks just like..." The line went dead before she could finish. Checking online listings confirmed her statement. Fresh photos showed smiling faces posing in rooms I knew intimately, unaware of the memories embedded in the walls. The footsteps returned nightly, their rhythm matching the house's original structure rather than my current location. Sometimes they brought company, whispers that organized themselves into recognizable patterns, forming words I didn't want to hear. Protective measures proved ineffective here, their energies dissipating uselessly against modern materials and construction techniques. Research revealed disturbing connections. Other houses built during Thorne's lifetime, their blueprints bearing similarities to Maplewood Avenue's design. Accounts of identical manifestations surfaced, describing the same progression of events, the same final confrontation. The realization hit with crushing force. Thorne hadn't been working alone. The house represented one node in a network of similar structures, each maintaining its own portal and collecting its own stories. Every attempt to warn others met with polite dismissal or outright hostility. Authorities claimed no record of disappearances at Maplewood Avenue beyond the Carters, while historical societies denied knowledge of Thorne's activities. Online forums deleted posts about the house, citing violations of community guidelines. Even Mrs. Henderson stopped answering her phone, her curtains remaining drawn against prying eyes. The final pieces fell into place gradually. The house's purpose extended beyond mere habitation or haunting. It served as a way station, a testing ground for individuals marked by specific genetic markers and psychological profiles. Those who survived became carriers, spreading awareness while remaining powerless to prevent the cycle from continuing. Failure meant absorption into the house's essence, adding another layer to its accumulated memories. Now, as I write these words in a coffee shop chosen for its lack of architectural significance, I understand the true nature of the curse. The house doesn't end with its physical structure. It propagates through those who encounter it, ensuring its survival beyond demolition or decay. The footsteps approach again, louder this time, accompanied by the familiar drop in temperature. Outside, a moving van pulls up to another Victorian-style house, its new occupants unaware of the legacy they've just inherited. The photograph on my table shows new figures joining the procession, faces I recognize from recent research, their expressions carrying the same mixture of knowledge and resignation. The message on the back has changed, now reading, "Tell them." But who would believe me? Who could understand without experiencing it themselves? The house's memories pulse through my veins, demanding release, seeking new vessels to carry its story forward. As I pack my laptop, I notice a young couple browsing real estate listings on a nearby table. Their laughter seems forced, their conversation sprinkled with phrases about fresh starts and affordable charm. The woman's hand absently traces patterns on her coffee cup, geometric shapes that match the house's wallpaper design. Her companion studies a listing with intense interest, nodding at features that should raise red flags but instead spark excitement. The footsteps have reached the base of non-existent stairs now, their rhythm matching the couple's conversation. Outside, the moving van's engine idles, waiting to transport another family to their destiny at 437 Maplewood Avenue. The photograph's image shift again, showing the house's facade with lights burning in every window, though I know it stands empty tonight. The message on the back fades, leaving only blank space that seems to watch me with unseen eyes. I leave the coffee shop, the bell above the door chiming in familiar cadence with the approaching footsteps. Behind me, the couple bends closer to their listings, their discussion growing animated as they discover the perfect property. The house remembers them already, adjusting its dimensions to accommodate their presence, preparing its chambers for new stories to collect. And somewhere in the spaces between worlds, the entity waits patiently, knowing that doors once open can never truly be closed.